This time on Shift Points, we cooled down this 66 C10 truck with a new vintage air system. We saw everything that we got done under the hood, so that has, we're still kind of figuring out what all pulleys and stuff that we need. But while Dad works on that and tries to figure that out, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on the underdash stuff. So I went ahead and emptied out the box here. This vintage air kit comes, it probably should be a little intimidating because it comes in like 4 different boxes. You've got that big one there. You've got one box for the compressor itself, then you got another box for all the condenser parts and everything. So I think probably initially, if you look at all this, it's a little, kind of like I said, a little overwhelming if you kind of didn't take it a piece at a time. But looking at it, all these brackets go on the big underdash unit here. Looks like this is the new glove box. Which worked out really good because the glove box that was in this thing was absolutely mangled and destroyed anyway. So it coming with this new nice plastic one. See, these things have to be shortened to clear this big unit under the dash. So all of this stuff eventually is going to be kind of under the hood or under the dash. It comes with like a relay system and everything, all the wiring you need. For those that don't know, who've been living under a rock, to be honest with you, these vintage air units, they replace anything that's vacuum controlled or anything like that on these old ones, and they replaced all the electronic servos. You can see that here. These servos control everything as you move the switches and stuff. Everything's electronically controlled to move the flaps and everything inside of these units. They just work really good. So that's the reason why they're the price that they are, to be honest with you, because they've got a good name and they've got a good reputation for doing what they do, which is make really good heat and cooling units. So I'm gonna go ahead next and get all this stuff out of the wrappers, and then kind of lay it out and kind of get an idea of what I need to do, see what all I have and kind of what the next steps are. I know that this piece here is to replace that door that I took off. If you saw in the first video, in the deconstruction video, this goes in there and just replaces that. So you got to silicone that and do all that kind of stuff. This goes into the firewall for sure. There's a template in the instructions to use to figure out the extra hole that you need to drill to install that kind of stuff. So I think it's gonna work out really well. So let me get all this stuff unwrapped, figure out what all we've got, and then kind of start on that. Well, to be honest, right off the bat, definitely some disappointment here. Got this out, got the big unit out, and this piece right here is broken off. I'm sure we can take something to get that put back together, but it's a little disappointing that straight out of the box up from Vintage Air that this would be like this. So, like I said, you can see that they've definitely this stuff's been like siliconed on at some point anyway, so it looks like that's probably just kind of silicone hasn't worked or something. So I'm gonna have to look at getting that figured out, making sure that's on there and rigid, because last thing we want is that to come off. So that's definitely disappointing to kind of kick everything off, but let's see what we can do to fix it. There are a couple pieces that are reused in this process, one of them being these defrost fittings that fit into the dash itself. So let's grab those. And basically you have these, and they have some adapters that come into the packaging as well. This right here. So this slips onto that. See if I can get that in place here. So that's going to go on like this, and there's these little S-clips that are used to hold these together. So I'm going to get those put in place, because that's actually the next thing you do. After you deconstruct everything, I've got to put this panel on the side door and then get these hose adapters put in place. So let's do that, get that back in, and that'll be that much. So we got the defrost vents and their adapters. That's all done. Just these two S-clips on each side that clip that in place. I think they're very snugly in place. So the next thing the instructions call to do is do some modifications to the firewall and things like that. I'm gonna go ahead and get all this under dash unit, all these brackets and stuff put on. These go onto this, if you look. So this actually has two bolts in it here, some threaded inserts. So this bracket goes on like this, so that's going to go on next. And then you got to connect all the lines and everything and lubricate the O-rings. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of do that real quick. Probably just do another time lapse, honestly. So I don't think there's anything going to be super riveting. If there is anything interesting as I go through, I'll stop and show you. I know I didn't actually show this yesterday, so I definitely want to show that now. Set this down here real quick. So all these lines already come like this basically, and they come with these O-rings. So I mentioned yesterday that you do this and you have these O-rings, and what you want to do is put them on very carefully, make sure you don't like nick them or scratch them or anything. And then if we look over here in my container of other stuff, wherever it is here, here's this mineral-based oil that they tell you to use on all of these O-rings. That's just to make sure that they don't tear or do anything crazy. So I just take that, I leave the O-ring up just a little, and put a healthy drop on it, and then I wipe it all the way around, push the O-ring down in place, and that basically puts that mineral oil on the front and the back of that. Make sure it doesn't catch or tear or do anything like that. Okay, everything that has to go under the dash is now together and assembled. So you saw when we put this bracket in, this is actually going to go toward the front of the truck. This is the ECM that controls all this stuff. So that goes pointed toward the passenger, or toward the driver's side of everything. We got this bracket installed as well, and got all the lines on. So all 4 of these right here are all together. That's put on. These all had the O-rings in it, just like I showed you. Got that mineral oil on them, and then this connection up here. They sent this press tape with it too, and they said to make sure that all the exposed metal on this right here was covered with this press tape. So that has that completely done. Now we need to go start doing some modifications to the firewall of the truck so that we can get this bolted up in place. So we looked at all this yesterday, and Dad noticed that if this pump ends up staying here where we think it's probably gonna live, if you go to take this lid off, so tight. Got it. You gotta try and take that lid off. Runs right into that alternator bracket, and you can't get it off, and you couldn't put fluid in it even if you wanted to, which of course we want to. So he's taking this stuff off. There's options to like buy different mounts and things like that. He's gonna look and see if he can kind of make some of this work and just space everything out, because this needs to come forward about 1/4 of an inch to get aligned with whatever pulleys we end up putting on the front of the motor. But yeah, so that's another thing. This bracket here is just kind of in the way of even being able to take this lid off. So he's going to work on that. And I'm going to take my template, modify the firewall, and take our block off door here and get that put in place. Basically, you're supposed to take the stock screws that came in this panel, that came in the door, use some, we're going to use this Permatex MaxFlex black gasket maker, put that on the back side of the door and seal it up really good. Make sure you don't have any sort of air leaks coming in that way. So I saved you guys the arts and crafts times that it took me to cut out the template. But you put the template here, line up that upper OEM hole, and then line it up with the old heater box hole that went into the cab. And then there's just that one hole that has to be drilled. So I've already got it center punched and ready to go. So I'll get that put in place and go ahead and get this template off and then get that hole drilled out. And from what I can see, that's the only hole that we have to drill. So that's pretty non-invasive. So that's good. So with some help from Dad on the outside, I brought the evaporator unit in here, raised it up, and there's 2 bolts that go in this lower bracket, or the front bracket I mean, that you saw me put on. There's some threaded inserts in that, so this goes up in there. The bolts come through the firewall. There's a 3/4 inch spacer that goes up here in the top to accommodate for that a hole in the insulation that is there from the factory. So this is all up in place. Next thing we got to do, I think we're gonna get the truck back down on the ground, because you have to make sure that this is level front to back and left to right. With those 2 screws in place, there's not a huge amount of leeway, but there's a little bit. So I want to make sure that this is level good, and the reason is this drain down here, this has to let the unit drain, so we got to make sure that that's level, make sure that all that water goes to there and then out the drain through the firewall, which we have to drill a hole for that too. So once we make sure that this is level and in place, you take this upper bracket up there and you through those 2 holes drill a 3/16 hole, and then there's 2 sheet metal screws that come with the unit to run through this and lock it down. With those 4 in place, there's no movement left in this that can go anywhere, and then after that we'll drill the hole in the firewall for the drain. So really, so far until we see if there's anything else, I don't think there is. So you have the 1 hole you had to drill using the template, you have the 1 hole for the drain, and you have the 2 holes here for the sheet metal screws. The 2 holes here are kind of in this area, so you won't ever see them. I don't think you'll ever see them out there under the hood. So really the only 2 seeable holes that you're drilling are the drain and then the 1 hole, 1 9/32 hole to mount this unit. So sometimes you get a little lucky. Dad was using this piece of stock as a straight edge to do some alignment out there under the hood. But if I take this and I go straight ahead to the firewall, this stuff's 1 inch thick, and they want that hole to be 1 inch below the bottom of this drain. So that's perfect. So I marked a line for the top, come down below it, marked another line, and then that's going to give me exactly where I need to drill right there for 1 inch. So now I drill a 1 inch hole there to run the hose out. Okay, everything on the interior is kind of wrapped up right now. We've got the hose here. That's the drain hose, goes down. It's got a pretty severe angle on it because you want to make sure that drains, keep this unit safe and everything, last thing you want is a bunch of water in it. So that's one more thing checked off. Alright, did a couple things off camera while I was just kind of getting all this stuff together. One being this block off plate that goes up here and replaces where another point where the heater box, it's actually where the heater box was mounted. Same thing as the door on the inside. We took RTV, went around the outside perimeter with it and used those stock screws and put it back in place. And then down here we have the where the heater hoses will go and where the AC connections are. This is the same thing, has a plate with 3 holes in it, RTV around the outside of it, screwed in place, and the grommets, put those into the plate on the top and the bottom, and then push the fittings through. So that should give us plenty of room to do everything we need to do to get that stuff tightened up. trying to think. I guess I'll check and see what's the next thing I need to do, but I think the next thing really is just lubing up O-rings and putting on hoses and everything. So that's a big chunk of this. So let's see what we got to do next. Seems to be a little bit of a reoccurring trend. We've hit a little bit of a roadblock on the under hood stuff. There's supposed to be a hard line that connects here and runs up to this lower line up here in the firewall. It's called the liquid line, I think is what they call it. And it's not here. We've looked through every box and through every nook and cranny, and it's just not here. So we called Vintage Air. The guy was super nice. He said he'd get one made and send it out to us as quick as he could. That a missing part should take priority. So hopefully that's gonna go there. I went ahead and got this lower heater hose on. It has this pump that goes in line with that, and this one actually goes to the intake manifold. So that's gonna end up, you know, once we get all this in line, that hose will go over to the intake manifold. Dad is still working on trying to figure, he's been working on getting the alternator spaced out and the power steering pump spaced out to try and get some alignment out of something out of here. We're definitely gonna have to change out the front pulleys into something. We just haven't figured out exactly what just yet, but he's getting a lot closer now that he's got this alternator spaced out. Now that he has that spaced out, you can actually get this cap off. Doesn't look like it from this picture, huh?
Move the water pump pulley back.
Oh, you moved it back some? Okay.
Yep.
So he moved this water pump pulley back some too. So I didn't realize he had done that. Yeah, so we're working on trying to make some sort of sense of that. I do have to change out this fitting to a 5/8 instead of this 3/4 that was in it stock. So there's still plenty that we could do. Hopefully it's just not a huge delay to get that thing here. I can go ahead and start working on the underdash stuff, go ahead and get the vents in place and stuff like that. Maybe work on the wiring some as well. So there's still plenty to do, but we didn't miss it. We weren't missing a piece though. So I've been working on this 66 Chevrolet truck again. Figured most of the stuff what I've kind of been doing has been a little not so entertaining, so I kind of powered through some of it more, but I wanted to show you and kind of catch you up what I've been doing. The Vintage Air kit comes with these whatever you want to call them, louvers. Actually this part's probably kind of more of the louver, but still these housings, it's called a housing. These housings here on the outside, there's two holes that get drilled into the dash right here, here, and here. And so there's those two that mounts this one, and this louver clicks in place. And then if you look on the back side of it, this one has a position already made for the ducting. So you can see I've already run that ducting to this one and then run it through there and over here to this side. So it gives you, in the instructions, it tells you which one of these ports needs to go to which one. So you can see all of that here. So I'm working on getting that in place. So same thing over here. There's actually 3 screws that mount this one here, and one over there. And that all gets tightened up under the dash. Same thing, these click in place here. And these also, this housing actually has the ports built into it. So got this put in place, started working on the ducting. I got the defrost vents back in place here, and I already got the ducting run for both of the defrosters. There's 2 different size hose. There's a 2.5 for the regular vents, and then a 2-inch for the defroster. So I've kind of got these run as best I can, I think, to still clear the glove box that comes with it. I started kind of looking to that glove box, and I could be wrong, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a hassle to kind of put in. Doesn't seem to fit super well, but maybe when I put my hands back on it here in a minute, I'll have a better idea. While I've been doing all that, Dad was working on this lower alternator bracket. So when he took and spaced this out, so I'll show it when he gets out of the way here. When he spaced that alternator out, it kind of messed up the alignment on the bottom, on that bottom hole on the alternator bracket. So he had to cut the bracket and shorten it a little to get that alignment back where it needs to be, so you can actually get a bolt through that bracket. But I'm gonna come around on this side. So you can see right there, he's got the spacers that just fell there. That's gonna get that, that'll get that spaced out where it's supposed to. But you can see there that where he's cut it and then shortened it, and that will let that that will let that go onto that stud right there on the bottom where it's supposed to go. So like I said, nothing that's super crazy right now, but we wanted to at least get you caught up on what we've done so far. He's gonna finish getting this put up in place. I'm gonna go ahead and finish get the ducts, all the ducting run, and then I gotta start working on the wiring to get everything plugged in. We did order the controls that kind of go for this truck. Talked to Ben and Jerry, and they basically said that's really the only option that's gonna be any less than probably a month or two, because all their stuff's all custom built. It's built to order basically, so any order that comes in they build it. So getting anything else was going to add a bunch of time to it. So getting the controller from Summit was definitely the way to go. So we called Ed over at Nichols and got him to order what we needed. So hopefully it'll be here later today, or maybe tomorrow. So the radiator is also supposed to be here today. So hopefully we're gonna get some more parts and we're gonna really get further down the road on this thing. I'm gonna go finish up the ducts now. So it took me a little while and a little bit of not reading the instructions properly, but I got all the ducting and all the wiring put in. Should have showed you guys, but this comes with a wiring harness. One side of it plugs into this, the ECM here that controls everything. The other side of this will go over to the control panel whenever it gets here. But I've kind of got everything routed. There's a plug here, and there's a relay that gets mounted in here, so that's mounted up. And then there's wires that run out of the firewall. This goes to that pump that goes in line, and then right here is a circuit breaker. They say to mount that as close as you can to the battery, but it won't go through the firewall, and everything's attached, so you can't cut it out and put it back in. So there on the inside of the firewall is as close to the battery as I can get it. So I'll put some screws in and mount that there, up so it's kind of hidden and everything. And the other side of this, so here's the ducting, here's the defrost ducts. This one's going to the passenger side, this one's going to the driver's side. And then if we get under here, like I said, I had a little trial and error to kind of get everything up under the dash so it's not hidden. So if you're setting up here for your passenger or the driver, you're not really going to see those big kind of bulky ducts. And I finally got everything routed and run how it needs to be. And I'm really happy with it. I think that this really does good. I'll have to clean it up. It's dirty from where I've been rolling around with it, but these mount up. The chrome on these really matches the chrome kind of everywhere else throughout the truck, so that's really good. I think that's going to turn out really good when the controls get here. We'll get those mounted up, get that plugged in here. These two wires, one is a switch 12 volt and the other will be the light, the power for the light that goes into this control panel. And then if we go out here to under the hood real quick, you can see I took some of our trusty loom, got that routed through the firewall here. This is a ground. I'll probably end up just grounding it to the intake manifold somewhere because it's pretty short and I hate to mess with it. Like I said, if they've made everything like this, I don't really like to extend stuff unless I absolutely have to. So I'll probably ground this to the intake manifold. The other side of that plug is right here, plugged into that. That goes to this right here. And then the other wires come forward. Red wire goes to positive battery, whites are the ground on the battery, and then that's looped through here with this loom is from one side of the compressor, goes into this loom right there, and that runs up here, goes to one side of our binary switch, and there's a blue wire that came from in the cab and all the way out here, and that goes to the other side of the binary switch. So really, the wiring on this deal is pretty straightforward and everything's pretty much pre-terminated. There's a couple of terminations you have to make, like that spade connector that goes onto the binary switch, but in general, this is about as easy of a wiring job for something I've seen in a really, really long time. Really straightforward. All the details are listed in the instruction manual, where everything goes, where the firewall is, what needs to go through the firewall, what stays on the inside. So that part has been honestly really easy. We'll have to do some cable management again, make sure everything gets tied up where it needs to be, and then we'll get that wrapped up. The other line that was missing with this kit is supposed to be here tomorrow, so we'll get that in place and we're gonna have this really far along. We're still waiting on the pulleys and the control panel. Those are coming, all of that's coming from Summit. So hopefully they'll be here maybe tomorrow. And if so, man, we are clear sailing, really. It's looking really good. So let's wait on those parts to come tomorrow. It's getting late, we're getting tired, so we're gonna wrap it up for today. So we'll see you tomorrow. The other thing that I've been working on, again, not super exciting, but went ahead and got that purple wire that runs, is the switch 12 for this Vintage Air, run over to the fuse panel. It's going to connect over to where the heater plugged in. It's a switch 12 volt source. I have to verify that once I get the battery back in. That should be how it is. But I'm just run that off of that fuse panel. I don't really love just going straight off the back of the ignition key. You can, but with these old trucks, it's a lot harder too. You'd have to like tap into the wire or something usually. Like the Ron Francis one that we have in the red truck, that comes with some spare spades on the back of it that you can actually plug stuff into. That I don't care to use, but these old ones like this, don't really love to do it. So I try and run everything off the fuse panels. This thing does have glass fuses in it, so it's, you still have to deal with a little bit of the older kind of stuff, but there are some spade connectors, spade terminals that come off the side of the fuse panel to add stuff into it. And like I said, we unplugged where the heater was initially plugged in anyway, so we already had that opened up. So that's run. That brown wire there is going to go to the control panel whenever it gets here. And also under here, did a little bit more cleanup and added these hoses. So we went ahead and hooked these hoses up. We're laughing about, if you look at the pictures that are sent in the instructions, everything's just a lot cleaner. As you can tell, these lines are just a little long. So, everything, nothing's really in a bind or anything, but it's just, it's just hard to run them in the way that the picture shows. Well, it's actually impossible to. You pretty much have to run them this way. We'll have to make sure this kind of gets tucked over here away from the exhaust manifold as much as possible. And then, of course, where I had the pump mounted was dead in line with this, so that was all kind of bound up. So now I have a new piece here. I'm going to try and figure out a different way to route this so the pump's kind of out here freely. It's not bound up on anything. And then we're still waiting for that other line to get here. Once it gets here, we can go ahead and connect it down here to the Firewall, and then that'll have this underhood section done, essentially. And really, after we get the control panel in here, this whole Vintage Air system will be complete. So it's really, this whole process, thankfully, knock on wood, and so far has just been about as easy as it possibly could be. So definitely want to thank them for making it as simple as it is. I mean, there's little things, but anytime you have a bolt-in kit into something that's 60 years old, you're gonna have little nuances, little things you have to kind of tweak just a little. But this one has had very minor stuff, just like little tweaks of the bends of the lines and stuff, so that they can come through the Firewall, and the radiator support. But other than that, really easy to do. So if you can read instructions and you've got some basic hand tools and stuff, you can get the main assembly put in place. Good news, parts finally came. So first thing I'll show you is this is the deluxe control panel for the Vintage Air system. I am really happy that we went with this, because this piece looks really nice. It has the harness, the one harness that runs over there to that ECM under the dash over there. Looks like there's maybe one more wire we have to use here. I haven't looked at the instructions on what it says to put it together, but I am very happy with this. So I'll get that put in place. The other thing that came are the crank pulley and the water pump pulley. And the reason we needed those again is because we needed to have a double groove pulley so that we could run the compressor and run the power steering that we put on here. So I'm gonna let Dad talk you through what he's decided. He's measuring up some stuff here. So what all have you decided to do to run this?
Nothing yet.
Well, you gotta tell us. We're under the pressure now.
I'm trying to figure out the routing on the belts. I'm gonna have to run 2 belts, of course. The alternator has to run off the back pulleys. The power steering has to run off the front pulleys. And of course the water pump and the crankshaft have 2 pulleys each. The air conditioner has a double pulley, so I'm trying to figure out the routing as to what belt is going to attach to which component. So I don't know exactly yet how I'm going to do this, but we'll update you here when we get this figured out.
I want to show everyone the pulleys. So here, like I said, so the stock one's laying over here. You can see it's got one pulley, or one groove and one groove. This is the water pump, and this is for the crank right here. If you go here, these came from Summit, but I can't remember the brand on them. Classic Industries maybe. Anyway, I will look at them, but they come black powder coated like they are right here. They've got the double groove, and then down here on the crank another double groove. So that gave us the options that we needed to do this. So like you said, once we kind of figured that out a little better and figure out which way we're going to route them, where everything's going to go, we'll show you that as well. But we were really kind of held up. I was kind of stopped on the Vintage Air stuff because I didn't have the controller, and he was stopped on this routing of the belts and figuring all that stuff out because we didn't have the pulleys we needed. So this has really kind of suddenly freed everything up, and we're really glad those came today. So I got the controls put in place, and they turned out awesome. So here we go. I'm really glad we went with this because this just basically fell in place. One thing I will say, if you do decide to do this to your truck or one of these trucks, if you do the deluxe panel like this, make sure that you put it in first, because that screw for this panel at the bottom that attaches to the bottom of the dash is actually under the vents here at your knees. This is all the way over, so it's not like I have these put on incorrectly. This is as far to the right as I could get it. So I did end up having to pop these out again, take these screws off and take the screws out and rotate this up so I get that screw tightened up in there. But like I said, 100% worth it, because they look like they were just supposed to be here. They match everything else, and it was literally this brown wire was attached to the deluxe controls in here had a light bulb in the top of them actually, so that brown wire there is attached to that gray wire that was part of the light bulb that tells the ECU to turn the lights on this, because this is actually lights up too. So when you pull the headlight switch, the dash lights come on for all of this stuff, and this actually lights up too. The purple wire I showed you guys went over to the fuse panel already, and then the controller just plugged right in here. So I kind of tidied these up with some zip ties. I'm not going to put the glove box in because you actually have to calibrate this to how it's supposed to be, and you have to have access to this port right here that has to be grounded, and there's a certain sequence that we'll go through with that too. So I'm not going to put the glove box in. I did do some test fitting on the glove box the other day though. Going to have to do some trimming to clear these to even start to get that thing in there in place. So that's going to end up being a little bit of work, I think, just to get that in place. This is really, really good. I'll probably call it good on this. I'm going to tighten up everything. We're going to tighten up everything, all the fittings out under the hood. Once we get those tight, we actually ordered a vacuum pump and some gauges to be able to evacuate and charge this thing ourselves. We plan to do one on this. There's a chance we eventually put one in the red truck, in the 55 truck. I would probably put one in my truck eventually. So having those, I think, almost in one setting, you could just about, in one charging, you could just about pay for them. So I think if we have this one, and if we ever put one on the red one in my truck, we'll have more than paid for the pump and the gauges and know how to do it ourselves. So the only thing left on the Vintage Air is to get those fittings tight and to get it charged. And once Dad gets the pulleys figured out, we'll be able to turn the compressor. He's been out there studying that pretty heavily to make sure he gets everything that needs to be driven off of the right thing driven. But luckily, with this control panel in, everything under here is completely done. And I'm just going to kind of pan over it one more time to show you everything. I'm very happy with it. As far as installation wise, easy to do, looks like it's just belongs here. So 10 out of 10 vintage air, well done. I don't know if my opinion means anything to you, but I'm happy with it. Well, it finally happened. Dad, tell them what you got figured out.
Well, we ended up finding the right belt length to separate instead of running one long belt between these two, which was what I was concerned about. We ended up splitting it between running the alternator, the power steering off the crank, and the water pump. And the other advantage to this is you've got 2 belts on the water pump, which will rescue the motor. If something dies and you kills one of your belts, you've still got 1 belt running the water pump. The only thing that I wish was a little bit better was the surface on this belt on the power steering. If that don't cause any issues, I think we'll be okay. And short of that, the only other thing that I can come up with would be put a double pulley on the power steering and a triple pulley on the crank, and run 1 single belt in addition to this for the power steering. But I think there's enough belt surface on that power steering to take care of everything.
So we got the 1 belt on that, and then you get the other belt off the crank water pump that's driving the compressor.
Yeah, you got two, actually 2 belts off the crankshaft running the water pump. If the air conditioning belt breaks, you still got water pump, power steering. If the other side breaks, you won't have power steering or an alternator, but you'll at least have the water pump, which that'll rescue the motor and keep from cooking the motor. So that's with the no volt holes on the cylinder heads and having to use the mounts that goes on the exhaust manifold for the air conditioning compressor. And you also had to use, for the power steering, you had to use the original old front style motor mount bolt holes in a small block to mount the power steering pump. So this is the best that we can come up with. I think it'll be okay. I think it'll do what we want it to do, but it was kind of a puzzle.
So the other thing that I got done, and it's nothing exciting, we got these lines tightened up over here on that side. So all of the air conditioning is done now. Basically, the only thing we have left is to charge it. I'm going to save that for later. I'm going to add that to kind of the end of one of the other videos for this one, because we've more than showed you a bunch of different stuff and basically step-by-steps on how to install the entire vintage air system on this truck, as well as the pulley, getting that figured out for this style truck. One thing I will show you real quick that I don't think I actually showed, he did end up making some spacers here and here to get that alternator out here enough so that we could get this double pulley on it and get all that lined up.
We had to move this out so we could get to the
right
cap on the power steering pump. So
yeah, that's right too. So you can get the cap off now where it sits, and you can, you have to use a funnel, but you can put power steering fluid in it. So it's definitely better than it was, because it was impossible to get off it initially. So there you go.
Come out, but you'll have to have a transmission funnel.
Yeah.
To get it in it, but at least you can get it in it.
That's right. So thanks everyone for watching. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining Shift Points. If you want to check out our other stuff we got going on, of course we've been working on this 66 truck, but of course we've got the other videos on the 55 truck. That truck is hopefully going to go on its first drive pretty soon. We finally got it started. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. It's part 3 of getting that truck started. Yeah, it's a good one. It's really good. So if you want to kind of keep along with us as we go along, if you want to hear more about our podcast that me and a couple of my friends do, Wynn and Jackson, check that out. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We try and kind of keep everything up to date on whatever we're doing and whatever's happening in the racing world and stuff like that on our social media. Check that out, and make sure that when that button pops up in the center of the screen after I get done talking, you click subscribe. Makes a big difference, and we really appreciate it. We'll see you guys next time.